Hey, good afternoon, folks. Welcome back. This is Freight Dog Danny, and I'm on the road again. This time starting in Brookville, Ohio, joining the Wolf Creek Rail Trail, so named because it's on an old railroad bed and it's near the Wolf Creek here in Brookville, Ohio. Today we are headed to Verona, Ohio, which is kind of an off the beaten path old railroad town, which kind of fell into disuse when the railroad stopped going there. Let's see what this tractor is going to do. I think he's going to wait on us. Yes, sir. Okay, like I said, Verona is a little town off the beaten path that grew around the railroad when it passed through there. And it's a little rural farming community. But when the railroad stopped going there, the town kind of dried up. You know, at one time it was a real going concern for a small town. They had their own bank, they had a school, they had several ongoing businesses. But now I would say the population is no more than 300 to 500 people. And they have to drive at least 5 or 6 miles to get anywhere where they can get some groceries or gasoline or anything. About the only thing left in the town, there's a little cafe that is in the old bank. There's 2 or 3 little businesses like radiator repair shops and little things like that, and a couple of antique shops. But that's about it. You know, it's just a small, quaint community that I think is kind of cute, and we're going to drive into that today and take you by the bank house, which is kind of a real cute little cafe that was built in the old bank. And the bank is the size of a small home, but that didn't stop them from keeping the strong bank appearance. They have Greek Revival columns out front, and it's real well kept. Somebody turned it into a cafe, and they're only open 3 days a week from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. But it's a good place to get sandwiches, burgers, fries. You can get some salads. They've got gourmet coffees and some pastries. So it's just a neat place to go get something to eat or something to drink. And one of these days I think I'm going to try to take you there when it's open, and we can get an interview with the owner, and you can see the inside of it. But after that, we're going to go down to another of Preble County's covered bridges, the Warnke Bridge, which is located about halfway between Verona and Lewisburg, Ohio. And we'll talk more about that as we get closer to it. Continuing on with our previous discussions of e-bike battery fires, the latest fire that occurred in a bicycle shop, I think it was located in Chinatown in New York City, and actually killed 4 people. And New York City, as you know, is one of the most densely populated cities in the country, as well as one of the highest cost of living cities in the country. And as a very densely populated city, you know, a lot of people are into e-bikes now for commuting, but because it's a big city, people are using it for DoorDash and other food delivery from restaurants and courier services and things of that nature. And there's probably over 1,000 of those guys, or more, who knows. But because courier drivers or restaurant delivery drivers are probably on the lower tier of income, and they're living in that high cost of living city, they have to buy the cheapest e-bike that they possibly can. And so that means they're getting a cheap remanufactured battery rather than a quality battery that's been inspected by Underwriters Laboratories or one of the other international laboratories that does that sort of thing. And so, like I said, it's an accident looking for a place to happen. And they had a bunch of those e-bikes in that shop, and probably a bunch of those cheap batteries, and they were charging overnight, which you should not do. And it was just a recipe for disaster. And as well, in a city like that, all these people are carrying their e-bikes up several flights of stairs or on elevators to their tiny apartments and charging them in those densely packed apartment buildings. And so that's not a good thing either. One of the other things you need to do is to always follow the manufacturer's recommendations on how to charge the battery, where and when. Definitely don't do it overnight. You need to be able to monitor it. But, you know, most of the time these batteries, if they're fully drained, it's going to take 6 to 8 hours to recharge them. And, you know, that's not really practical. So you got to have it someplace where you can see it, and also someplace if it does catch on fire, it's not going to catch the rest of the house on fire. And you need to only buy the OEM batteries from the manufacturer or an authorized seller from the manufacturer. When you charge the battery, you want to plug the charger into the battery first. First of all, make sure that the battery is off before you begin charging. But plug the charger into the battery first, and then plug it into the wall outlet. If you do it the other way around, there's a possibility of arcing or a surge of power, which may cause a battery fire or an explosion. And the main thing is, as I've mentioned in previous videos, I don't like the idea of buying the bike online unless you know that it is a trusted manufacturer. But I like the idea of purchasing from a brick and mortar bicycle shop, because then if anything goes wrong with it, you just take it back to them rather than trying to deal with a guy in China. And if it's some company you've most likely never heard of, they probably have little to no non-existent customer service. So if there's a problem, let your bike dealership deal with it and not you. Let me slow down for these people here. Hi guys. Hi. Okay, we're approaching the intersection of the historic National Road, US 40. Runs from Baltimore, Maryland, beyond Colorado. I'm not sure where it stops. I don't think it goes all the way to the coast. But this road was actually commissioned to be built by Thomas Jefferson. And this is a major road. They come flying by here 55, 60 miles an hour, so we'll definitely stop and make sure we're clear. And I think we're good. But much of the country's history took place right along this road. And you can see the remnants of old gas stations, truck stops, motels, and other businesses. And it reminds me of that movie Cars, the original Pixar movie, the cartoon movie about cars. And it was about those small towns that were drying up because of the interstate system. And the town we're visiting today didn't fall victim to the interstate system. It fell victim to the railroads. Now, I'm not going to talk all the way to Verona, so we will pause the video for right now. I'll get a little bit of exercise and pedal, and when we start entering the town of Verona, we'll turn the camera back on and we'll see you in a few minutes. Welcome back, guys. As promised, we are approaching the town of Verona. And this is where the Wolf Creek Rail Trail ends, and we'll be entering Preble County as well. And as I've mentioned before, for whatever reason, Preble County does not have any bike trails or bicycle paths. The only place I can ride is a couple of small parks, which you don't get very far in, so you got to go around and around the park several times, or you get out on the open road. Fortunately, there are several county roads in Preble County that you can get on, old country county roads that have very little traffic, and I feel pretty safe in riding them. And the more I ride, the more comfortable I get with mixing with traffic. You just have to be exceedingly careful. And as I've previously mentioned, you can probably see that my long sleeves, those are in Day-Glo yellow or chartreuse. I also have the same color of safety vests on, as well as my helmet is Day-Glo yellow. And the one thing I forgot to do, I didn't do my pre-flight properly. I didn't turn on my strobe lights. So there's the front strobe is going, and I've got a red strobe light that once we get into town here, I'll stop and I'll turn that on. When we get to the bank house, we'll be stopping. I'll be dismounting and letting you get a good look at the Bakehouse Cafe. Okay, here we go. Take a left turn here to go to the bank house. Traffic's clear and we're going. And I see the bank house already ahead on the right. Now here's the post office here to our left. It does still have an operating post office. They have a municipal building. I'm not sure what this is here. But here is the bank house. And I'll just dismount. We'll park the bike. And as you can see, we have the Greek Revival columns, and this bank is just about the size of a small house. Here we go, the Bank House Cafe, soup, sandwiches, gourmet coffee, old-fashioned desserts. And as I mentioned, they're only open Wednesday through Saturday, or correction, Wednesday through Friday, 4 to 8. And I just think it's a real cute place. Mrs. Freight Dog and I came here one time and had a nice meal. It was run by some real nice, friendly people. I'm going to cut the camera off for just a moment, and I'll be back. Hey guys, welcome back. As I mentioned before, I didn't do a good pre-flight before I got started today. I didn't turn on my strobe lights. I also forgot to empty my pockets. I like to take everything out of my pockets and put them in my bag here up front. So that's why I turned off the camera. We're just going to run through town here and let you get a good look at everything. Like I said, a lot of real nice, neat as a pin little homes and yards. As a town that has been in decline for several years, naturally you are going to have some properties that are run down. But for the most part, it's a pretty neat little town. Here's the old school. I'm not sure how long it's been closed, but it's fallen apart, of course. And that's pretty much it for the town. We're going to take a left up here, and we'll be on our way to the Warnke Covered Bridge. Now a little background about me. As I said, I'm a retired Air Force pilot who later became a retired airline pilot. And between both airline and the Air Force, I flew freight all over the world, hence the name Freight Dog Danny. I joined the military in 1974 at the close of the Vietnam War, and I went from what they used to call high school to flight school. I went from a high school graduate into the Army as a warrant officer helicopter pilot. The Army keeps its warrant officer pilots just that, pilots for your entire career. All the services take a commissioned officer, that is a second lieutenant, regardless of the way that he got his commission, either through ROTC, Officer Training School, or one of the service academies. And they envision that second lieutenant may one day be Chief of Staff of the Air Force, or whatever service you're in. And at some point in your career, normally around the 6 to 10 year mark, if you're going to progress as an officer, you're going to have to give up flying or just do flying part-time, and you're going to be doing staff work as you get developed to go on to the Pentagon and other higher leadership roles. I managed to stay in the cockpit for 32 years, 4 years of the Army and 28 years of the Air Force. And I had other additional duties, but I was still an instructor pilot and aircraft commander and managed to fly just as much as I ever did. Wound up getting about 10,000 flying hours in the Air Force, and then plus my about 1,100 hours in the Army, then all the rest of my time, about another 9,000 hours as an airline pilot, all of it in the Boeing 747. Like I said, I started out in the Army, and one day I was in Germany, out in the field, eating cold sea rations in the rain outside of my UH-1 Huey helicopter. and I heard a jet fighter passing by overhead, and I looked up, and the clouds parted just enough for me to see the sun glint off of his canopy. And I thought to myself, you know, wherever he's going, I bet he's not going to be eating cold sea rations in the rain tonight. So about 3 years later, I was in Air Force pilot training. Me and a buddy that I was in the Army with in Germany, we had gone through Army pilot training together, stationed together in Germany. Then we got out and went to college to finish our degrees. And then went into Air Force pilot training. We weren't in the same class, but he was 2 or 3 classes behind me. But we nonetheless were at the same pilot training base. And there our careers split. He went on to fighters, and I went on to fly the C-141 Starlifter, which is a 4-engine jet transport. I spent 24 years flying the Starlifter before it retired. That was both active and reserve. And then my last 2 years of service that I had, I flew the C-5 Galaxy, which is the big jumbo 4-engine jet transport. And 10 years of the career, 10 years of the military career in the reserves overlapped with my airline career. Did 22 years flying for an international air freight company, and like I said, that was all on the Boeing 747. Now my dad, who always wanted to be a pilot, but never got the opportunity to, when I expressed an interest in aviation, he always encouraged me and paid for my flying lessons when I was 16 years old. And so I had a little flying experience before I actually hit the Army pilot training. But my dad was a truck driver, drove an 18-wheeler all over the country, and I take great pride in the fact that a Boeing 747 has 18 wheels. Now there's a little bit of difference between the fighter world and the transport world. And you remember that scene in the original Top Gun movie where Maverick gets called in on his commander's carpet because he had made an unauthorized low pass of the aircraft carrier's conning tower and made the officer in the conning tower spill coffee all over himself, and the commander tells him, Maverick, you do that again, your next job is going to be flying plastic dog shit in a cargo plane to Hong Kong. And when I saw that movie and that line, I kind of thought to myself, how's a guy get a cool job like that? And flying cargo is not as glamorous as flying a fighter, but you get to fly a whole lot more. And in a fighter, for the most part, you take off and land the same place you took off from. And not so in the cargo world. We're always going to exotic places. I've been to all 7 continents. I've been to Antarctica, I think 6 times. And starting to fly cargo for the airlines, pretty much the same thing as what I was doing in the Air Force. Went to a lot of the same locations. We did have a lot of military contracts as well. We did have some, I started out, the company that I flew for was all cargo, but several years ago we expanded into passenger operations, not scheduled, but charter and the military charter flying business. So it was always good flying the troops, but flying passengers is very different. And most guys that fly cargo like it because, as we like to say, boxes don't bitch. And the cargo ramps are usually off on the side of an airport where you can get in and out. You don't get caught up in the gate holds and traffic delays and things of that nature. About the only place where we do is JFK in New York. And that's always a nightmare. But I tried to avoid the passenger runs as much as I possibly could, but sometimes you just didn't have the choice. Also, when you got like 12 flight attendants on a jumbo jet, dealing with flight attendants is like herding cats. So it's just one more thing to be concerned about as the captain. But I had a pretty good career, and I always consider myself to be very blessed to have a job that I never even considered to be work. The flying, the travel, the working with crews, the camaraderie when you're flying overseas is just pure pleasure. everything that I had to do to be a pilot is work. That is the twice annual full physical examinations, the training, the posting of publications. When you decide on a career as a pilot, you've sentenced yourself to a life of study, because you can never know it all, and you can't chance anything to memory, so you're always in the books, keeping up with everything. And plus, there's always a lot of changes, not only in regulations, but updates to the aircraft. And whenever you train in a new aircraft, you have to go to another school for about 6 to 8 weeks. So it's a lifetime of study. Now that I'm retired, I get to spend a lot of time with the grandkids and spend a lot of time at home. I spent 45 years living out of a suitcase, and kind of glad it's over with, but I do miss my buddies, and I miss all the exotic travel. I lost my medical a couple of years ago because I had a heart episode, which resulted in the implantation of a pacemaker. The good news is pacemaker doesn't really limit your activities any, and you don't have to take any medications. I'm not on blood thinners or anything of that kind. And the story of how I got the pacemaker, or the condition that led to it, is a story in itself, and I'll have to share that with you some other time. And we're approaching the Warnke Bridge here in about 1/10 of a mile. And here we go. We'll stop so you can get a good look at the bridge. I may have to pedal a little bit coming back up this hill. Okay, we'll just stop right here. And the Warnke Bridge, I'm pretty sure, was built in 1895. If we get a little bit closer, I'll be able to read the sign. But the earliest bridge that's here in Preble County was built, I think, in 1829. That is the Roberts Bridge, which is a double barrel bridge, which is one of the only ones left in the country. And that was in my first video. But we're going to go back to it one of these days, because my first video I really didn't do a good job on. But in a previous video, I mentioned that my daughter, one of my daughters, asked about the covered bridges and why they had covered bridges. We don't have them today, and I really didn't know. So I just kind of talked out my rear end and said that they were just fashionable at the time, and people wanted them, and we didn't have a shortage of labor or materials in which to build the bridges. But after doing a little bit of research, I found out that a uncovered wooden bridge and exposed to the elements will only last about 20 years. A covered bridge, on the other hand, will last over 100 years, as these have all done. We have 8 covered bridges in Preble County, 6 of which still see regular road traffic every day. And so we're really blessed to have these bridges in Preble County. And the other 2 bridges are located in parks, relocated into parks when they were damaged, one due to a storm and one due to vandalism. Let's go ahead and zip on through this bridge. We'll turn around and come back through the other way. But take a look at the truss structure inside this bridge. Now, this is just over a small creek, and so it's not one of the bigger bridges. And this is pretty much the equivalent of barnwood, but some of the bigger bridges are just, they have just huge, absolutely huge timbers. We'll turn around in front of this house here. I try to avoid those slow 180-degree turns, because maneuvering these big, heavy electric bikes they're kind of hard to maneuver around at slow speeds. And so if you're going to fall, it's going to be one of those slow turns or when you stop. So you've probably noticed I'm zipping through stop signs, and that's the safest way to do it on these bikes. Now, of course, my camera's on a chest mount, so you can't see me turning my head. But rest assured that I'm making sure that it is clear both ways before I make that crossing. But I always slow down. I always slow down for pedestrians or other bikers as well, unless I'm passing them going the same direction. And just try to be courteous. But you definitely just want to slow down and then make sure it's clear. And if it is, keep moving. Now, my previous ride to this one is following the same route. I covered 20.4 miles, which is the farthest I've gone thus far. All my other rides were around 12 to 14 miles. And my total mileage since I got the bike, I'm over 170 miles. Today's going to put it up around 190. But I had some video faux pas and when I was editing, and so I just decided to redo this route altogether and delete those other videos. Since I have started this YouTube channel, I'm finding that editing these 1080p videos, my old 6-year-old MacBook Air laptop computer just could not handle the processing. I deleted as many files and programs as I could. I looked into getting more memory and more storage capacity, but that particular model I couldn't upgrade any further. So in order to process these videos, I had to buy a new computer. So I went ahead and got a iMac desktop computer that has a lot more processing power and storage capacity and memory. And so since I'm not spending my money on flying, I've spent my money on this e-bike and a new computer. Now that long ride, 20 miles on the last one, I was, as I'm recording, I'm using the throttle, which uses up a lot of battery power. And then when I pause the video, I am pedaling. So I don't know exactly how much is pedaling and how much is throttling, but I'm just going to take a wild guess and say it was about half and half. But that 20-mile ride, I used up 64% of the battery power. I think I had 36% battery power left when I ended the ride. So I can probably go another 5 to 10 miles, but I don't want to stretch it too far because I don't want to get stuck out in the middle of nowhere having to pedal this thing with no electrical power to assist. So we'll see what happens today. Now going the other direction, eastbound out of Verona, about another 4.5 miles is a little privately owned airport in the little town of Phillipsburg. So I think in a future video, we're going to follow the same route out of Brookville, up the rail trail into Verona, then we'll hang a right and go take a look at the little airport. As a pilot, you get a sore neck your entire life because every time you hear an airplane, you just got to look up. And if there's an airport nearby, you got to go see what's going on there. So one of these days, maybe in the next video, we'll pay a visit to the Phillipsburg airport. And I happen to know the owner, and so we'll stop in and say hi to him. But for the time being, I'm going to pause the video. We'll go through the town of Verona again, then we'll be hitting the rail trail and heading back to Brookville. I'll see you when we get through Verona.